All right, everybody, it's that time again. You know, KEMPIRE Radio celebrates not only great singers, but we also celebrate the people behind the music. And this time, in our new series of Behind the Songs, we are so excited to welcome a songwriter, producer that has written for so many different artists, from Brandy to Destiny's Child, Whitney Houston, JoJo, Ruben Studdard, RL, Chris Brown, so many great, it's just so many great artists, and so excited to welcome him here on KEMPIRE Radio. Please, everybody, welcome Harvey Mason.
Yeah, KEMPIRE. What's up, everybody?
Harvey, first of all, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to do this.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me and putting me up there on the list of some other great songwriters that I know you've dealt with.
Most definitely, and we're so glad to add you a part of this Behind the Song series. I just wanted to, first of all, those are very familiar with your name and they're very familiar with your songs, but they may not be familiar with how it all began for you. Can you just kind of give us a brief overview how you broke into music?
That's a long story, not a brief overview, but I'll try and make it short. I started when I was really young. I was taking piano lessons as a kid from the time I was 6 or 7 and always writing songs. And skip forward to after college, I started a jingle production company. So I was doing music for TV and radio advertising companies. And I was doing that in order to try and earn money so that I could buy equipment and travel to Los Angeles and play people my songs. Wow. And after doing that for 3 or 4 years, and after finishing school at University of Arizona, I was commuting back and forth to Los Angeles playing people my music, and eventually someone heard a song that I wrote and said, "Hey, your stuff sounds pretty good. So work with my group." And that was an A&R man that was at Motown Records at the time, and that was my first real job producing records.
Wow. And then, people are very familiar with some of your work that you did with Rodney Jerkins. How did that relationship come about?
A little bit after I got back out to L.A. and was doing my own production and writing and collaborating with a bunch of other writers, I'd written a song called Truthfully, which was a song that ultimately ended up on Brandy's Never Say Never album. And Rodney was the executive producer of that record. He heard the song. Brandy really wanted to record it, and Rodney called me and said, "Hey, Harvey, I'm overseeing this project. I would love to have you come in and work with us, but I would like to work on the song with you. I have some ideas for the song." And I told him that'd be my pleasure, and so we got together on that song for her record. Then I ended up staying, and he asked me to work on the rest of the record with him, which I did, and then from there we went on to Whitney Houston's record, and then from there we went on to Destiny's Child, a bunch of other amazing records that he just kind of brought me along with. And I ended up working for Rodney for 2 years and co-writing and co-producing and doing a bunch of stuff for him for a couple of years. We did the Michael Jackson records. We did, so many projects right in that period that were really, really cool. I learned a lot from Rodney, and we had a great time.
What's one of the key things that you think that you learned from working with Rodney?
Well, I learned a lot about the work ethic. Coming from an athletic background, I played basketball in college. I always had a drive and a passion and energy for setting goals and really trying to accomplish them by any means necessary. But when I met Rodney, he kind of had the same mentality, but he applied it to music. He would stay up in the studio for 2-3 days at a time. He would program tracks, 5, 6 in a day. He was relentless at the way he worked, and so I saw that you could translate athletic, some of the qualities that make you a successful athlete, and you bring them over to the music business. And he was the first person that I saw do that. But I also finished, more technically, I learned from him kind of some of the tricks of the trade as far as finishing records, how to take a demo and pull it off to a song that should be on the radio, or at least sounds like it should be on the radio. So, he taught me a lot of things in that regard. I also saw some things in that world that I didn't want to do in my career, and I saw some things that the way things were done that I didn't want to do. So I learned a lot on both sides of the coin from Rodney. He was a great inspiration, a great guy to work with, but I just knew when I set a company for myself, I wanted to do certain things my way and certain things that I learned from him. So it was a really nice combination, a great way to come up.
Most definitely. And you mentioned the song that you did for Brandy, Truthfully. How did that song come about?
I co-wrote that with a guy named Mark Nelson. He was a singer, songwriter. I think he was in a group, and I can't remember what the group was called, but he was a really good songwriter at the time. And I had a track that I started, and he heard the track, and he actually came up with the majority of the lyrics and melody on that song, and I did the music. And at that point, I was just sending music around to artists and executives and lawyers, just anybody to try and hear my music. I'd done some production before that on some good artists, but not of the caliber of Brandy, so that was one of my first big placements. and that's where that song came from.
You know, with Brandy reemerging, you know, pretty much set for a comeback, what do you think Brandy needs for this next album?
In my opinion, Brandy's an amazing, amazing singer and a great talent. I think she needs the right song, showcase her vocals without being too much. I think she needs to have a song that's something people can relate to. A lot of times, Brandy's such an amazing singer, an amazing vocalist. I think that gets in the way of her crossing into that mass appeal level, although she's a huge superstar artist, so I'm not trying to be critical, but I think her next song needs to be something that people can relate to, people can sing along to, people can clearly understand what the melody is, what the hook is, and just something that people can get real easily and right away, because she's such an amazing singer. I think sometimes it overwhelms kind of the average listener.
And speaking of comebacks, I mean, we actually got a chance to see you on the Braxton Family Values reality show, and we saw the whole development of the Braxton sisters, you know, going in and working on an album. Is Toni a part of this album? Is this album actually happening?
Well, I've been sworn to secrecy because, you know, they're in season 2 now, and they're filming actually right now. We did some stuff at my studio maybe a week or so, a couple weeks ago, and so the stuff is still developing, and I can't give away the storyline, but there's definitely stuff going on.
Okay. And what do you think Toni Braxton, I mean, Toni Braxton's legendary already, but what do you think that, you know, what kind of song does Toni need to kind of bring her back to the level that she was at?
I think it's going to be tough to be at the level she was at for any artist, not just Toni. At that time, people were really dedicated and loyal fans, and they bought records, and they listened to albums. Now people buy one song and download it usually for free, and you know, want to get somebody's mixtape before they go buy a Toni Braxton record. But I think Toni definitely is an amazing artist. She's one of the coolest voices, I think, in my era of music. I think any song works for her. She's once she puts her voice on a song, she really makes it her own. So again, something that is a great concept, great melody, something that can showcase her vocals, but something that's still relevant and current with today's market. I don't think she should be trying to compete with the Rihannas and the Beyoncés and those people. I think she should really kind of know her lane and do some great classic Toni Braxton music. But I'm not an expert, buddy. I'm just, I just write the songs. I let the executives and the smarter people figure out how artists should make these comebacks.
And well, I mean, you worked with Toni. I mean, first of all, you worked on one of her biggest hits, "He Wasn't Man Enough," and then you worked most recently with "Hands Tied." What was the evolution from working with her with "He Wasn't Man Enough" to "Hands Tied"?
Well, you know, on this last record, I actually did a bunch of songs with her. I did "Hands Tied," "Why Won't You Love Me." There was a bunch of songs that I wrote and worked with her on. But as far as the evolution is concerned, "He Wasn't Man Enough" was a song that Rodney started and we wrote with the Dark Child Camp. And it was a song that we specifically wrote for Toni, but she'd never heard the song. L.A. Reid came to the studio, played the song for him. He went crazy. Called Toni. Toni came down to the studio and cut it. And that's how that whole thing happened.
Wow.
Whereas the project that I worked most recently with her on, she was around a lot. She was in the studio. She was involved kind of from day one in the creation process. And there were a lot of outside songs written by other songwriters that we brought in and then recorded with Toni. But the ones that I wrote, she was involved in. She was around, and it wasn't just like we were writing songs for random people. They were all very specific for her.
Okay. And, speaking of other legendary divas, Whitney Houston, "It's Not Right, But It's Okay."
Yep.
What's the story behind that song?
Well, I can't take credit for writing that song. That was Rodney who wrote that song, but I was definitely involved in the recording and the production of it. It was a song that had been written right around the Brandy time, a little bit after when we were working on that record.
Yeah.
And as soon as we finished Brandy's record, we went back east to start working with Whitney, and it was a song that Rodney played for her. She loved it. You know, actually, Clive picked it first because we had to play Clive the music at that point. He really loved the song. Whitney loved the song, and we ended up recording it on her. Took probably 2 or 3 trips to get it done because I think we flew to New York once or twice, and Whitney couldn't do it, or she had just finished recording another song, was a little bit tired vocally, so we ended up coming back a second time. But we ultimately got it done. I think we did 2 or 3 other songs on that project as well. But that was a fun time. And then most recently, I worked with Whitney on her last record. So again, the evolution from probably 10 years ago till the last time I worked with her on her last record has been a pretty interesting process.
And it's funny because I was speaking with Claude, one of the artists that we featured here on, Behind the Songs, and I asked him, he was actually in the studio with Whitney when she recorded, and I asked him if the voice was still there. I'm going to ask you the same question. Do you believe the Whitney Houston voice is still there?
The voice is still there. It's changed. I think, in my experience, all people's voices change over time. As you age, you lose a little bit of, sometimes it's the high end, sometimes it's the low end, sometimes it's the pitch or the control, sometimes it's the rhythm. And I've worked, with a lot of people over wide periods of time, such as Toni, as you said, and such as Whitney. So people's voices always change. Whitney's voice is definitely different from what it was when we first did her first, or that record you spoke of. I think depending on whether she's rested and whether she's fresh, she sounds a lot better than when she's tired and fatigued. And I think she gets tired easier now because of, the years she spent on her voice, the time that's gone by. I think that's all affected her voice. But when she's fresh, she still sounds great, and she still knows how to deliver a vocal almost as well as anybody I've ever met, as far as dynamically knowing how to tell a story, knowing how to capture her listener, knowing how to bring people into the lyric. Those are things that she does naturally that I think really amaze me every time I record with her.
And after your Darkchild years, you developed a production team called the Underdogs. How did that come about?
When I was with Darkchild, I met a guy named Damon Thomas, who was at that point riding with Babyface and with his camp, and was just getting ready to break out of that camp. So he interviewed with Rodney and came and sat in the studio with us for a week or so to try and write some songs and see if he would fit in with us. It ended up not happening for one reason or another. I don't know exactly what happened with that, but after I left Darkchild, we ran into each other and we spoke, and Damon and I said, hey, we should get together and write a song. So we got together, wrote a song in the garage of my house, which is funny to say, but and that song turned out to be a song called I Like Them Girls, which ultimately went on Tyrese's record. So that was the first song we ever wrote, and we played it for Clive. At that point, who was the A&R for Tyrese. He freaked out, wanted it immediately. L.A. Reid wanted the song for one of his artists. Got into be a little bit of a bidding situation, and when we got the check, we didn't have an account. We said, we don't have a checking account. We don't know who to make the check out to. So Damon and I said, let's just start a company real quick so we can have somewhere to deposit the check. And we were at lunch and just, laughing. We said, yeah, we're the Underdogs. And so we said, there it is. That's the name of our company. So that's how it started. That was our first song. That was our first check. And from there, we kind of collected writers and brought in other producers, people we liked, people we respected and wanted to collaborate with. And it kind of went on a nice, I'd say, 8-year run or so where we worked every day with artists, making records, and just trying to outdo the last song we wrote with the next one.
What were some of the songs that the audience may know that you guys worked on during that time?
Oh gosh, you're asking the impossible. I have to remember old songs. How You Gonna Act Like That? Tyrese was a big record.
Great song.
Mario, How Could You? Ruben Studdard, Sorry 2004. Omarion's Oh. Marcus Houston's Naked, Chris Brown, Take You Down, Jordan Sparks, No Air.
Some big records, Harvey.
I know I'm trying to remember some of them, but I don't know. I'm failing. But
no, those are pretty good so far.
Those are a few of them, yeah, and so many more great songs I'm probably leaving out that I'm really proud of, and artists that I've made good friends with, and we had great experiences making music together. So I'm sad I'm not able to recall all of them, but there's some great songs in there and things that I'm so happy that I was a part of and so thankful and very proud of.
You mentioned Jordan Sparks' No Air. I always wanted to know the story behind that song and the development behind that song and how it ended up with Jordan.
That song that's a pretty long story too, but the song was started by a piano player that was working with us at the time at Underdog. He was kind of tinkering around in his room, and to tell you the honest truth, I was walking in the back of our studio, and I just happened to hear it out of the corner of my ear. It was just 2 or 3 chords he was going around in circles about, I said, what is that? What is that? And he says, I don't know. I said, let me sit down and let me mess with those chords. And we took, the ideas of that, started working on the track, myself and Damon. And then we brought in some writers, James Fauntleroy, Eric Dawkins, Little Steve Russell. And we said, hey, we're working on this track. Check this out. And then we all started singing ideas. And it was actually James Fauntleroy who first started singing No Air. And I said, that's the title, that's the title. And then we worked backwards from there, started coming up with the lyric and kind of the concept of what that means. What does no air mean? Because we didn't really have a meaning for it at the time. And then we kind of worked backwards from that concept. We had the idea for the track, finished the lyric, finished the track, and then we were actually going to save that for an artist that we were developing. And an A&R person heard it and went crazy and started calling me incessantly for the record. He said, his name's Jeff Fenster. Harvey, you've got to give us that song. We've got to record it on Jordan. And I didn't want to record it on Jordan at that time. She was just fresh off American Idol.
Yeah.
I wasn't crazy about, just putting that song, which I thought was a really, really big song, on a new artist that I'd never heard of.
Yeah.
So we told Jeff Fenster, the A&R, I said, you got to make it an event. We got to get a duet. It's got to be somebody special. So he called back about 3 months later and said, okay, what if it was Jordan and Chris Brown? Would you do it? And we had just, we'd done records with Chris Brown on his first record. We worked on the second record, so we had a good relationship with him. We'd had some hit records together with Chris, and we felt pretty good about that combination of artists. So we said, yeah, we'll do it. We went and recorded it, and it was, her first, I guess, her big single. So it was, it worked out in the end.
It most definitely did. Big, very, very big single. Speaking of Chris Brown, you did some work with him recently on the Fame and the Fortune album, right?
We did. We worked with him on Fame. We did one song, and then we've got a couple that we're working on for Fortune, which is pretty cool how he's doing the records back to back. So as soon as we finished Fame, we're like, okay, now we're getting started on Fortune. And we were like, oh my gosh, crazy. So it's been a challenge and fun. We're trying to outdo the last record, which I thought was a pretty great record.
What can we expect from the Fame the Fortune album?
The Fortune album, you can expect a lot of the same, not the same, but a lot of songs that sound like material that could have gone on Fame, but I think it's the next level of that. Our song, I think, is the one that we finished already. I think is as good as the song on the first album, on the Fame album, but better. So I think most of the producers and songwriters, and Chris for that matter, did it that way where they staggered it, put some of the material on the first album, and then the next album is going to be a step up from there. So I can't speak for all the songs, I haven't heard them, but I know the couple that I've heard have sounded pretty incredible.
Wow. Well, there are many layers to Harvey Mason, and I know that you're very involved in movies. How did that come about, and how does that have a connection to the music?
Well, it came through music. All the connections that I have in the movies came through music. Is people that wanted us to do music for their movies, whether it was music for in the film itself or in title songs, which we've done a ton of. We did stuff with DreamWorks for Shrek and Kung Fu Panda, animated movies like that. And then they called us to do the Dreamgirls soundtrack, which was like 60 songs and tons of music. And so I've done kind of the wide variety of music stuff. So at that point, we knew all the studio people. We knew all the people that were creating these films and directing and writing these movies. So I kind of got pulled into it on the documentary side with the LeBron James film that we did through Lionsgate, and which I also scored and did the soundtrack for. But all my music connections, or all my film connections rather, have come through kind of the music avenue. And recently we've done the end title for the film The Help, which is an amazing movie, and that was Mary J. Blige song that we wrote, recorded for that. Now we're working on a movie called Sparkle, which is a remake, and that's actually featuring Jordan Sparks and Whitney Houston, among other really cool artists and non-artist actors. So that's going to be cool. What else have we done?
When is that coming about? The Sparkle.
Sparkle's we're right in the studio with it right now. We did a couple songs last week, and we're going to Detroit next week to do one or two other things. R. Kelly's writing a lot of music for that, which is incredible.
Wow.
The guy's kind of an amazing writer. So it's been really fun getting to work with him on some of that stuff. But I don't know the release date for that.
Well, Harvey, you've written so many different songs, but one of my favorite songs, I had no idea that you were even involved in, and when we had him on the show, I told him that I loved the song, RL's Good Man.
Oh, yeah. It's a good one. I like that one.
I love that song. I love that song. I love that video. I had no idea that you were connected to it. How did that song come about?
That song came about because we met with Clive Davis at Eris at that time. RL was signed to him. Actually, it was at J Records when Clive started J Records.
Yeah.
And we were actually one of the first production companies that did a deal with Clive when he started J Records. Oh, wow. And RL was one of his first artists. So when we met with Clive, he played us one or two artists, and one of them was RL. He said, we need music for this artist. It's going to be one of my first releases, kind of an R&B crossover artist. Told us what he wanted. And we went back to the studio, and Damon, my partner, he sat down at the piano and started messing around with kind of chord progression, and I was singing, Eric was singing, some of the other guys were singing, and kind of we just started creating right on the spot for that artist. Good Man title, I don't remember where it came from, but I know the music started first. We had RL in mind, and we wanted to find something that could really be a showpiece for him vocally, because he is such a great singer. And we wanted, some heartfelt lyrics, something that he could really deliver on. Of course, got to be a little bit of a lady killer with that record, so give RL the chance to do that.
Yeah.
And that was, I guess, the evolution of that song.
Well, I mean, you've written for so many great artists, and people wouldn't even expect that you've also written for Britney Spears. Yeah,
we worked on, I think, 2 records ago, or last record or something, Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake, and a wide variety of different weird artists.
Most definitely. And also, I heard that recently you've been in the studio with Mary J. Blige.
Yeah, we did, I think, 2 or 3 songs with her. Her record sounded really, really, really strong. I'm excited for that to come out. I think it's coming out here, maybe November?
November 21st.
Okay, yeah, so you know more than I do. But, yeah, I'm excited about that. She's one of the coolest singers, and definitely one of my favorite artists to work with. Just her disposition in the studio. She's so professional. She's so generous to everybody, and just a total pro. You work with a lot of singers, and some of them are successful and act like they're really successful and let everybody know how successful they are. In other words, they act a little bit ignorant.
Yeah.
But Mary, on the other hand, of course, she's so amazing and so talented and so successful, but she acts the same as she always has. She treats everybody the same. She shows up early, on time or early.
Wow.
Warms up. She's a pro. She knows the song, and she delivers a killer vocal. Wow. I wish more singers would pay attention to how she acts.
And the tracks that you did for her album, what was the approach that you took, and what was some of the concepts that you wanted to bring to her for this?
She's a strong personality, and usually she sings from a strong woman perspective. So one record we did was called "You Want This." It was just a feel good, like confident song, and she's talking about when I go out, you look over here and you want this, and so it's a very simple message, but it's very fun, and it's coming from a place of a little bit of girl power. Another song is called "All She Wants Is You." That's her talking to her significant other and kind of telling a story about how it's a complicated story, but that's what that song's about. And there's one more song, I can't remember the title. But anyway, they're all written for Mary, because she is such a strong personality. And you got to give her something to dig her teeth into conceptually, because she sings with so much passion and so much emotion that if you give her just a boring song, to me personally, it feels like a waste of an opportunity to really tell a great story, and to have somebody that can really deliver a lyric. You don't want to give that up, because it doesn't happen that often. So we took the full advantage of that and wrote her 3 really strong records.
Most definitely. And I mean, you've worked with so many different artists, Harvey. Is there still some artists that you're dying to work with, or even songwriters that you really would like to collaborate with?
Yes, I'm dying to work with Usher. We have never worked with Usher in all these years, and every time we schedule it and something happens, and we know each other, and we've always talked about working, but we never seem to get it in, so we'd love to do that. We'd also love to kind of go into some other genres. I mean, we've been writing country western records, and I think we'd love to do a couple Rascal Flatts songs or Faith Hill or somebody like that. I think would be a fun challenge. As far as writers are concerned, there's a lot of great writers out there, and people that we were really excited to get together with. I mean, we wrote with Claude Kelly. He's so talented. And I'd like to write some records with Esther Dean. I think she's doing some really cool stuff right now. Rico Love. You know, there's a lot of really, really strong young writers that are coming out that we really respect what they're doing.
I mean, you just mentioned that you would like to break into doing some more country records. I mean, you've written a variety of different types of songs. Do you have a favorite?
A favorite record to write?
Yeah.
I like writing R&B records, to be honest. I mean, pop records are great because they always have huge hooks and huge sing-along component there. R&B records for me just feel natural, and they feel like I can get myself into the mood to write those songs pretty easily. My life experiences lend themselves to writing records that feel like R&B. I don't know, we call them ghetto ballads, but I guess what I love to write the most, if I had to choose one. But I also like the adventure of trying to write something totally different, something a little bit alternative, or something that just reaches a different place. Because when you're a creative person, or when you're a songwriter, hopefully you're creative, but when you're a songwriter, you want to try and challenge yourself, and you want to do some things different. You don't want to say the same things. You don't want to sound the same. So for me, the challenge is part of the fun.
I mean, some of your more recent records, where are you at with for Jennifer Hudson?
Yep.
What was the story behind that song?
Goodness gracious, you are killing me with these stories for all of them, man. The story behind that, well, I did a lot of work on Jennifer's record, and since we worked with her on Dreamgirls, I think we had a little bit of the inside track on the perspective and where she's coming from lyrically and definitely vocally. So that was a song that was written for her, and we got her in the studio. She loved it, and we kind of got her to record it, but I don't have a really juicy story about that one.
That's fine. What about, I mean, we've had JoJo here on the show, and she's about to make a huge comeback with new music. But you worked with early JoJo, Baby It's You. Yeah,
that's right. I love that. I love that song, and I really like JoJo. I met JoJo when she was 12, I believe, 12 or 13. And Baby It's You, we did a couple songs on that record.
Yes.
And a guy named Vincent Herbert actually introduced us to JoJo and said, hey, I need hit records for her. And we went in the studio and just kind of came up with Baby It's You and I think one or two other songs. And when we got her in the studio, I was blown away with how strong she is vocally and how much she could sing. That little tiny body and this humongous voice comes out of her. And she killed the vocal on that record. And for me, that's what sold that song, is how powerful and how much she felt that lyric and that vocal.
A couple more questions before I let you go, Harvey. And I thank you again so much for being here on our this is our third installment of Behind the Songs here on KEMPIRE Radio. You were a part of a song called Loneliness for Babyface, legendary Babyface.
Legendary.
What was the story behind that song, and how did you get that opportunity to work with Babyface?
That's probably a better story than my last one, but Babyface was working on a record. He asked the Underdogs to help him put his record together. We were brought on to try and do the whole album, actually. At that time, he was signed to L.A. Reid at, I think it was Def Jam at that time. So we started writing songs together with Babyface, which for me was amazing because he was always one of my mentors and guys I looked up to and people that I really respected. So we started writing, and we were writing at his studio, and then one day he just said, you know what, let's not write here anymore. And I'm thinking to myself, what is he talking about? But he said, let's go to Tahoe, let's just write in Tahoe. I'm like, Tahoe? What are we going to go to Tahoe for? But anyways, he packed up his keyboards, his guitar, me and Damon, and the three of us went to Tahoe, where he has a house up in the snow and mountains and trees and nobody around. We sat in that house every day for 10 days. We woke up, we ate breakfast at the house, we went in his kid's bedroom, actually, which he turned into a little studio with toys all over the place. And he pulled out the guitar, we pulled out pianos, and we wrote, I think, 14 songs in about 9 or 10 days.
Wow.
Just real dumb demos, super basic guitar, piano, vocal demos. Recorded them on, I think, just like a laptop, not even into Pro Tools or anything. And The Loneliness was one of the songs in that batch of 14 songs that we wrote. And the concept behind it, not to go into too much detail, but the concept behind the album was to tell the story of a relationship from start to finish. The initial meeting of when you meet the girl, when you see the girl, when you meet the girl, when you get together, when you build a relationship, when you fight, when you get back together, and then when you break up. And that was going to be the concept of Babyface's record.
Wow.
So The last song on the record after they supposedly, the imaginary couple breaks up. So that's why we wrote that song. It was in line with the chronology of the album, and it was kind of the end cap to the album. Supposed to be, but it didn't come out that way as far as the album was concerned. And I think it ended up being one of 2 or 3 songs we wrote on that record, but it never really filled that concept album slot that I think he was going for.
Oh, wow.
Love the song, though, and another quick story on that song. When he sang the record, we did the demo up in Tahoe at the house. When he sang the record, we went in the studio, the track was done. He went on the mic in the booth and sang from top to bottom, one take, which I don't think ever seen before in my whole life.
Wow.
And I was sitting behind the console looking through the glass at him singing, and I said, I can't believe this guy is singing this vocal like this. We got to the end, and he's like, well, I think it sounds pretty good. There might be 1 or 2 things I'd like to fix, but other than that, I kind of like it. And I said, wow, this is incredible. I love it. It sounds just like it sounded on the record right now. That's how he sang it.
Wow, shout out to Babyface.
Humongous shout out. All the ad-libs, all the dynamics, the building from the first verse to the chorus to the outro, all that was done off the top of his head because he knows how to tell a story. And that's, like, if I could say anything to people listening, the difference for me as a producer in watching these artists and how they interpret your songs is how they take the lyric and build it from the beginning to the end of the song. Sometimes as a producer you have to push the artist to do that. Some of the great artists know how to do it, and Babyface was the best I've ever seen at that ever, period, point blank.
Wow. That was a good story, Harvey.
Long-winded, but I think it's worth it. That's a good artist and somebody you can learn a lot from.
Oh, most definitely. And of course, we cannot have an interview with you and not talk about Tank and your work with Tank.
Yeah, I love Tank.
How did you start working with Tank?
That was right through the Underdog period when we were kind of putting together a really strong team of writers. He was an artist already, and we had worked on some music for his album, but he was kind of in between deals at that point. I think he was at Blackground, but I think he was at Atlantic. I don't remember where he was, but he came in to record some demos for his record, and we worked with him. We said, this guy's way more talented than the Tank that we hear on the radio singing, I Deserve, or whatever his song was at the time. This guy can sing, he can write, he can play, lyrics, everything. The guy was the overall package, so we brought him in and signed him to Underdogs, and we wrote a ton of great songs with him. He has so many great ideas. I mean, he's a great producer in his own right, but we really worked well together with Tank. Are
you guys going to be on the new record with him?
We did some work with him early in the process, so I'm not sure how it's going to work out. I don't know if... I don't think we even ever finished the song, so I don't have too good of a feeling about that, but hopefully it'll be a great record. He deserves to have another big hit.
Yeah, most definitely. Random question. Who do you think is an underrated singer?
Underrated singer? That's a tough call. Most of the singers that I like aren't underrated. They're already rated, so it's hard to say. I know one of my favorite singers that doesn't have huge hits on the radio right now is Joe. He's not underrated, though. Everybody knows he can sing, but I really, really love his voice.
Yeah. Well, who do you think is an underrated songwriter?
There's a new kid named Dwayne Whitmore. I don't think he's had a big hit record yet, but he's actually signed to a guy named Brian Kennedy, and I write a lot of songs with him. He writes with the Underdogs now all the time. Just he's not signed to my company, but he's a really talented young songwriter. There's a young producer, track guy named Mansour, who I think is bubbling really close to having some really big records. So I would say those 2 guys are young up-and-comers that are going to probably have a good string of hits.
Everyone heard it here first.
Yeah, you definitely heard it there first.
Harvey, before we let you go, what's coming up for you? What should we be on the lookout for? Any movie soundtracks, movies that you're going to produce? Any new projects that you're going to be jumping on? I know you just mentioned Sparkle, the Mary J. Blige record.
Yep. Sparkle, the Mary J. Blige record, which comes out November 22nd, I think you said.
21st.
The Chris Brown Fortune. We're working on quite a few artists for Interscope Records. There's one young 12-year-old that we're doing her record. A lot of new artists.
Aren't you also working with Pia from American Idol?
Yeah, we did records with Pia, did a couple songs with her. Nicole Scherzinger, we did her. There's a ton of really, really fun artists, a variety of artists, so a lot of good stuff coming from the Underdog.
What is it like to work with Nicole Scherzinger? I think she's amazing.
It's great, yeah. She's, again, one of those really hard workers, really dedicated, very talented, can do a lot with her voice. I think her problem has been, to this point, she hasn't really found a home for her voice. She can do so much with her voice. She can sing so many different styles. She can sing strong. She can sing soft. She can sound like anybody you ask her to impersonate. I think at this point, this record, she's really finding herself and her identity as far as how she's supposed to sing on records to make them Nicole records. You know, I think in the past maybe she's heard other people sing records and liked how they sounded, and maybe has gone down that path. But she can really, really sing, and she really, really wants success and is dedicated and is a very hard worker.
And another great singer we didn't really talk about, and we spoke about the soundtrack, but we didn't talk about Listen, the Oscar-nominated song Listen by Beyonce.
Yeah.
What's the story behind that song? That's an amazing song.
Great song. Unfortunately, I didn't write it. I just produced it.
That's good, too. That's important.
I'm just very jealous I didn't write that song. But some good friends of mine wrote it, and we were working on the Dreamgirls film. They needed one song to feature Beyonce. And so the music director, actually the music supervisor, reached out to Scott and Ann. They're two songwriters that we know, and they wrote the record, brought it into the studio one day and played it, and we all loved it. Once they heard it, she loved it, and then we produced it and put it on the soundtrack and in the film, and it worked out really well.
How do your parents, who I know are involved in music as well, how do they feel about what you've done with your career so far?
They hate it.
Why is that?
No, I think they're proud of me. My mom and dad are both musicians, and they're both really, really great musicians. My dad is like a world-class musician, so I think sometimes I'm a little hesitant to play him some of my songs, and he's like one of the best musicians on the planet. So I grew up around that. So when he hears my pop songs and my R&B songs, I hope he's proud of me. But I'm always a little nervous to play it for him because he is such a great musician, and I grew up around Bob James and Herbie Hancock and George Benson and people like that were the people that I grew up listening to their music and watching them perform. So hopefully I'm making some of those guys proud, and they're not bummed that I decided to go and make pop music on the radio.
What would speaking of that, like, what would you want your legacy to be? Once we won't get morbid, but dead and gone.
I think about it all the time. I mean, every day when I come to work, I think about that. Like, I want people to hear my music, and I want them to feel something. I want them to either be moved emotionally to the good side, happy and smile and laugh, or sad and feel some heartbreak or something, or the loneliness, as Babyface said. But I want to make sure that whatever the case may be, people think that I left this earth with some good music, and I left people with something to go to when they need to laugh or smile or cry or whatever. I just want to have music that I've created be here for a long time and be there for people to consume.
Most definitely. Harvey, well, I thank you so much for taking the time out to do this interview. And before you go, you have to do a radio drop for KEMPIRE Radio. All that we ask that you do is in the radio drop is you just mention KEMPIRE Radio and just mention it's a new era for KEMPIRE Radio.
This is Harvey Mason Jr. of the Underdogs. It is a new era, KEMPIRE Radio.
Thank you so much, Harvey. Have a wonderful night, and I hope you'll come back and keep us updated on all your new projects.
I would love to. Thank you for having me.
Have a great night.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.